Hello and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. Welcome to this week's episode of The Contented Narrative. Now, I will be looking at Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. The reason I don't have a hard copy is because, although I don't use it often for books, the book is actually on my Kindle, is Alice in Wonderland. So it was written by Lewis Carroll and published in 1864. I will be looking at the Disney adaptation that was released in 1951, although I do admit that there are a couple of adaptations that have gone out over the years. Now, I'll be looking at three things. I'll be looking at how good is the film, how good is the book, and the plot, of course. So film. This is such a cute little animated film. Honestly, it's adorable. The soundtrack is wonderful, and the little stories within it are beautifully created. I love each animation sequence. It's all very unique, and the whole film has aged so incredibly well considering it came out in the 50s. So, you know, I love how with this film, as you listen to the characters, you recognise the voices from other works. So that it's not, so back then obviously Disney would sort of like have one voice actor, but for like so many different roles within so many different films. Whereas nowadays they tend to look more for celebrities to voice characters, which obviously whenever I'm watching an animated film, I'm like, I know this voice. Why do I know this voice? And I have to Google like 20 times in a film. The whole story is imaginative. It keeps you on such a lovely little adventure with Alice. I love this film. I've watched it several times, but then I do love a good Disney film. Guess what? There's no true love's kiss. There's no marriage or anything like that. It's just a nice little adventure of a girl who's off dreaming in her own little world. And I will recommend this version any day of the week. It gets a 9 out of 10 for me. Now the book, this is such a cute but very confusing story, I'm not gonna lie. At times Alice is having a very in-depth philosophical debate almost with herself. And sometimes the narrative between the characters make me have to reread parts. And the thing that gets me is like she'll occasionally be like, but who am I? Am I you? And, you know, and I'm just like, you're like 10 years old or whatever, love. Just calm it. Do you know what I mean? You've got all that time to figure out who you are later on in life. However, it's such an enjoyable book. It really is. And it has such a whimsical ideas that you can't help but keep coming back to this narrative and keep coming back to this book and reading it. Now, to also have such iconic characters that you will quote for years to come as an achievement. You've got, you know, Off With Your Head, you've got the Queen, you know, We're All Mad Here with the Cheshire Cat. I'm late, the White Rabbit. You've got Happy on Birthday with the Mad Hatter. You've got so many things and everybody knows the characters and everybody knows the story. So I would recommend this book to everyone, even if you read it to your children, maybe a little bit older, because, you know, the deep philosophical debates might go a little bit over their head, but it gets that 7 out of 10 for me. So the plot. Now, both start with Alice lazing around and then seeing a little white rabbit with a pocket watch. So she decides to follow the rabbit through the rabbit hole and ends up falling for a very, 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 very long time. Because, of course, why wouldn't you follow a white rabbit with a pocket watch into God knows where? So then when she comes to a stop after falling for forever, she then ends up in a room with a very teeny tiny door. And obviously she's a very normal sized human being. So now in the film, with the door, things start to appear. So a bottle says drink me, biscuit saying eat me, and a table with a key on it. Now in the book, the key and the table are already here, and she talks to herself rather than conversing with the door. So you've got the conversation with the door in the film, but in the book you've got the conversation with herself. Sorry, there's this little bit of hair that's annoying me. 1 second. Oh my god. I know, it's so unprofessional, but I literally, it's my OCD kicking in. I literally can't have that little bit of hair just sticking out. I'm so sorry, guys. There we go. That's a bit, oh no, it's okay. They're uneven. It's fine. I'll just put it behind my head. So in both, she ends up drinking the liquid and becomes very, very small, but has forgotten to get the key to unlock the door. So she then eats a little biscuit and finds that she becomes extremely large. So in both, she ends up crying, and because she's so big, it's almost like a lake when she's crying, like her tears fall and it's almost like a lake. Now in the film, she then drinks more of the liquid and ends up so small that she fits inside of the bottle and floats right through the door's mouth, because again, the door can talk. In the book, the rabbit runs right past her, dropping a fan and gloves. So as Alice is fanning herself in the book, she ends up that she's becoming smaller, and all the while she's talking to herself and mulling over who she is, why she's here, why everything's going on. So she becomes very, very small and ends up making conversation with a mouse amongst the puddle that her tears have made. So Alice then ends up meeting a dodo and joining a caucus race to get dry from the water, which is basically just running around in a circle, in case you didn't know. So after the race in the book, Alice talks more with a mouse, but ends up alone. In the film, she storms off out of the race and walks into the woods to meet Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Now, Tweedledee and Tweedledum don't actually show up in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. So they then tell the story of the walrus and the oysters, which is a very dark story about a walrus that basically lures all these little baby oysters to their death, and he eats them all. Charming, of course. So in the book, she now comes across the White Rabbit again, who orders Alice to fetch some gloves and a fan from his house, because obviously he's lost the fan and the gloves that she found. I don't know what happened to them. She must have just lost them again. So when in the house, Alice drinks something and ends up growing very large again and taking over the house. Now, in the film, this does happen where she goes into the house for the White Rabbit and ends up eating something and becoming very, very large and being called a monster. But this is after the whole Tweedledee, Tweedledum bit. So in both, however, she then eats a biscuit and then shrinks in size to escape the house because everybody's trying to get rid of this monster that's in the house. So they try smoking her out, they try sending someone down the chimney, they basically try everything to get rid of her, and she ends up just consuming something, turning right small and then running off. So in the film, this is where she comes across the flower garden. They have a nice little sing-song, then the flowers start calling her a weed, start being really rude to her and kind of push her off to one side. In the book, she meets a lovely little puppy, has a play with him, and then off she wanders. So then after she's escaped, well, she's been pushed out by the flowers, and after she's, run off from the puppy, she then comes across the caterpillar. She's like, who are you? And, all of that. They have another philosophical discussion about who she is. And it's sort of like, she doesn't like the caterpillar. The caterpillar doesn't like her. It's absolutely fine. So then in both, as he's disappearing, he tells her that one side of the mushroom will make you small and the other side of the mushroom will make you big. So she kind of samples it, and in both she becomes very, very giant, scares a poor bird out of her wits. And as the bird believes that she's a serpent, because in the book, every time she changes, so she changes in size, it's never proportionate. Now in the film, if she grows big, all of her grows big. In the book, at one point her neck is ridiculously long, her head is quite large, but like her feet are, it's so strange, like she doesn't actually grow proportionately. So then she kind of takes something, goes back down to a normal size, and in the book, this is when she goes along and meets a duchess, a baby, the Cheshire Cat for the first time, and a cook. So Alice then gets handed the baby, and the baby then ends up running away with the baby because the Duchess keeps pinching the baby and is really mean to the baby, and the baby then turns into a little pig, as you do. So now in both, she meets the Cheshire Cat properly and asks for directions. Now the Cheshire is helpful because he tells her where to find the Hatter or the March Hare, all of which are completely mad. So Alice ends up with the Mad Hatter and the March Hare at a tea party that makes no sense. Absolutely no sense. But obviously we know that. The Mad Hatter and the March Hare are mad. So of course the tea party is not going to make any sense. Now in the film, it just seems like complete madness. In the book, there's a little bit of an inkling as to why they're constantly at this tea party. It's because apparently the Mad Hatter upset someone who then kind of stuck them where it's always tea time and they can't have any other part of the day. Bit strange, but that's kind of an understanding. So in the film, you then get the destruction of the watch through butter. It belongs to the rabbit. In the book, the destruction of the watch, it belongs to the Mad Hatter who's trying to fix it. In both, however, she leaves the tea party in anger because she hasn't had a cup of tea. She keeps getting told to move along. They're being quite rude to her. She's a little girl. She leaves in a huff. So in the book, this is where she ends up back with the table and the little door, and then she walks through to the Queen's croquet ground. Now in the film, she ends up walking into the woods. She gets very lost. She gets upset. Another beautiful animation sequence. And after she gets hopelessly lost, the Cheshire Cat gives her a shortcut that takes her to the Queen's grounds. So now in both, she's at the croquet grounds. And in both, she sees cards painting the roses red. You have to paint the roses red because it's the Queen of Hearts. If they've planted white ones and it's supposed to be red roses. However, off with their heads because the Queen, of course, she's smart. She knows. She orders them to be killed. So then the Queen comes around and meets Alice properly. And then the Queen of Hearts invites Alice to play croquet, where the Queen is an awful cheat. Awful cheat. So she cheats outrageously and Alice cannot win against her. Now in the book, the Cheshire Cat appears and offends the king, who demands his head. However, the Cheshire Cat at this point has only materialised his head, so how can you cut it from the body if it hasn't got a body? In the film, however, the Cheshire Cat gets Alice in trouble and she ends up going to trial against the Queen. So in the book as well, the Duchess has appeared at the game and is monopolising Alice's time, but is soon scared off by the Queen, who then continues to play the croquet grounds. So then at some point as well, Alice ends up, so after sort of like the croquet ground or whatever, Alice also ends up with a griffin and ends up having a conversation with a mock turtle because it's about the mock turtle soup or something. They end up having discussions about Alice's adventures and what made the mock turtle. And then in the book, they end up at the trial of the jammed tarts. Now in both, the trial in the book, it's the knave who stole the tarts, and in the film it's Alice. So there is a trial in both of them. However, in both, the Hatter, Hare and Dormouse are called as witnesses, and also Alice and the cook are called as witnesses in the book. And the jury leaves a lot to be desired. They're not the best. They don't know what's going on. They're terrified of the Queen. They're not exactly the smartest. So then at one point, Alice starts growing much larger than she should be. She starts telling the Queen off, but ends up shrinking down to her right little size. So then she has to run back. Now the film ends with, so she runs back, she's being chased. So the film ends with Alice being chased. She's yelling through the keyhole, and then she wakes herself up and she goes, oh, I've had the most dreadful dream. But in the book, it ends when she loses her temper with the Queen, is attacked by the cards, and that wakes her up. So in both, they end with her in real life rushing off for tea after she's woken up from this bizarre dream. So the plot started very similar, and there was a lot of the same plot points within the film, but we also saw a few sequences in the film that don't show up in the book, or if they do, they may show up in a later version, through the looking glass. Like Tweedledee and Tweedledum and the flower scene and Alice being lost in the woods. They're the three main things that don't show up in the book at all. Now, although both narratives are very enjoyable, the plot does differ somewhat, so it does get a 5 out of 10 for me. Now, this is my own opinion. If you agree or disagree with anything that I've said, please leave it below the comments. Don't forget to click like and subscribe so you're alerted when there's a new video out. And don't forget to remember to always keep it contento.